born in Missouri, Buffalo Lick, Missouri. I had two sisters, and my father was fighting the Northern War of Aggression. He came back and he wasn't the same. Unfortunately, we had to have him committed to a lunatic asylum. We had 40 acres of hardscrabble land, and if you can imagine, 3 women trying to survive on that. Well, my sisters Bertie and Beulah got married, and they moved to Colorado. Mother and I decided that that might be a good idea for us. And I had met at that time, in the youthful blush of bliss, a gentleman from Cornwall, and we got married. So excited. On the way out, I discovered I was in the family way. Sam did not feel like he ever wanted to be in a family. So he paid me off, we divorced, and he went back to England. Well, Mother and I settled in, and the money I got from Sam, I bought a home. And after a while, I met a gentleman by the name of Tom McDaniel. I enjoyed our courtship. We married. He moved in with me, and Mother decided maybe this is a time for me to go into another home. And she bought a house right down the street. Well, I eventually had Eva Pearl, my daughter. She was the light of my life, and I think she always will be. We lived for about 3 years, and Tom's occupation, he sold alcohol to the brothels and to the saloons. Unfortunately, Tom had a very bad habit of gambling. Quite a few arguments ensued. I was taking in laundry to make more money, as my mother was, and we just couldn't do it. It was balancing the finances was becoming a nightmare, and we argued a lot. Well, I think Tom got the hint because he said to me one day, I want to ensure our future, that we always have a home for Pearl. Let's put an insurance policy on this house. And having had a lot of fires in the area lately, I thought, what a great idea. So Tom got an insurance policy on it. His gambling got worse and worse. He'd come home drunk, quite in his cups, and he decided he wanted to make it up to me. He suggested we go up to Denver for a weekend on our own to rekindle our romance. We dropped Pearl off with my mother and went to Denver. Little known to me, he had hired an arsonist to burn our home. Got home, and Mother had Pearl down the house, or down at her house. I didn't have any idea that he had burned it down. One night, I'm sitting in the house, and there's a banging on the door. And I open it up, and a man pushed his way in, and he goes, where is Tom? He owes me for that. And I said, owes you for what? He said, he paid me to do this fire. I want my money. Oh my gosh. Well, Tom came in, of course, again in his cups, and they got in a big argument. Tom shot him, killed him. He claimed it self-defense. Well, it took quite a while to get that settled out, and I had had enough. I had had enough. No more penalties of marriage for me. I had other ideas. I had met and seen quite a few of the ladies. You call them what you want. Soiled doves, jeweled birds, women of questionable intention. I'm a businesswoman now. So I decided I was going to move to Colorado City. Mother had met and married a wonderful man, John Askew, and they had also decided to move there. that gave me the freedom. Pearl was safe, she was with Mom, and I could pursue setting up a business. I did. I found a place next to a very rowdy saloon that Tom had always supplied the alcohol. Well, I knew the man. I could supply my brothel with alcohol. I could offer gaming, and I could offer the pleasure of company of my ladies. It took me a while to get the right ladies, but I did. I hired a gentleman by the name of R.W. McCarty as my bartender. He had a cousin, which I'm sure you all recognize, Billy the Kid. R.W. was blinded in a mining accident in Cripple Creek, but he was a fantastic bartender. He knew where everything was, and he was quick, and he listened. He knew when there was going to be a problem, and he would warn the men I had hired to protect my girls. I wanted my girls safe. I had very few rules when it came to them, but one was no drinking and no opium. I wanted my girls to fit in so that the men felt like they were home, that they felt, well, let's be honest, they were going to get what they weren't getting at home.
How many girls did you have?
I had different amounts at different times. At the beginning, I had a French girl. I had an Irish girl. Oh, her temper. Oh my. And then I had a really sweet little Southern girl, Claire. Claire had a hard time actually being part of our profession. She was very timid. And I kept telling her, you really need to make these men feel like they're welcome in your home. We want them to feel comfortable. Encourage them to have a drink. Encourage them to gamble. You don't get alcohol. The bartender will make it look like you do. Encourage them to buy you drinks. And then you can decide whether you want to go upstairs or not. Well, we did this for maybe 4 or 5 years, and I met a gentleman. His name was Prairie Dog O'Byrne. He got that name because he kept prairie dogs in his carriage in a cage. Well, what was more outstanding about him, his carriage was pulled by 2 tamed antlered elk. Oh, wow. Thunder and Buttons. Well, John was a part of a tourist company. His family owned a tourism company in Colorado Springs. And he would take people out. He took a group of tourists out to Balancing Rock and Garden of the Gods. And he told them, Balancing Rock rotates 360 degrees in 24 hours. Those dang fools sat there for 24 hours. He also liked his cup, and Denver hired him to come up and be a billboard on his carriage for Christmas. Well, he got a little bit too much Christmas cheer and ran the elk through a glass window.
Oh my.
He was asked to leave. He had, at this point, decided maybe it was time to sell the elk. And the perfect opportunity was the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. He asked me to accompany him, which I was very happy to do. I knew that the house was under control. So we boarded the train and we went. Oh my goodness, over 400 acres of lushly beautiful landscaping, canals with gondolas going through it, Japanese tea gardens. It was so beautiful that L. Frank Baum was inspired to write the book, The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We had the most amazing exhibits. It was revealed on a lot of new products, Cracker Jacks, Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, Aunt Jemima, and the continuous clothing closure, zipper, which was not put into use for 15 more years. Of course, you know, all those little hooks and eyes and tiny little buttons continued. And you really did need help dressing. I'm very thankful I have help dressing. I also met Wyatt Earp and Buffalo Bill Cody. He came to the World's Fair hoping to do his Wild West there. Well, they wouldn't let him. They said no. So he sat up outside the gates, and he drew so much attention and so many people, they almost went bankrupt. The saving grace was the Ferris Wheel. It was taller than the Eiffel Tower, and each car was the size of a railroad car. And there were 22 cars that went around. It was 50 cents a ride. That is a lot of money. Well, there was also something else that happened at the World's Fair. Have you ever heard of H.H. Holmes? He was a serial killer. He built the Hotel of Horror, not far from the fairgrounds, and he lured hundreds of people from the fair. He had built it with gas chambers, electrocution, and suffocation. He dropped them down chutes into lime pits. He had an incinerator that he burned the bodies. What I found out later, which I find very interesting, is Jack the Ripper, who was responsible for a lot of murders in England. Holmes was at every one of those places at that time that the murders happened. He was arrested, and interestingly enough, after his arrest, there were no more rippers. His claim to fame certainly isn't one that Chicago can be proud of. Now, we have a lot of fires, and not much of a defense for a town that is mostly built from wood. One of my cohorts, Blanche Burton, died in a fire caused by a kerosene. And the firemen, of course, flew to the scene because, well, they were our customers. Of course, they don't want our buildings burning down. And there was a preacher named Duncan Lamont, hellfire and brimstone preacher, talking about these whores, they need to be in the fires of hell. Don't put it out. The firemen were so enraged they turned the fire hose on him. The legend is that he turned into an ice block. I wish. There were a lot of fires, and mine finally caught fire in 1905. Well, at that time, I was charging for the pleasure of an evening with one of my girls, $250. It wasn't, there's so many different types of levels. There were crib girls, there were streetwalkers. And then my place was one of the more upscale, classy places. I hired a Denver architect to come rebuild in brick. I had my flooring, which was marble, sent from Italy. Very much like the Broadmoor. Gilt ceilings, the crystal chandeliers were from Bavaria. My ballroom was spectacular. I offered comfort, I offered gambling, and gentlemen like to come, sit around, visit, and of course partake in the entertainment of the evening, which I was very thankful for. Then I met another gentleman. He was the editor of the Colorado Springs Gazette. He saw some changes. Colorado Springs wanted to annex Colorado City, and they had a problem with Sin City. I don't understand. We kept our business away from them. And honestly, some of my better clients were some of the forefront leaders of Colorado Springs. One was a Tut, Breakman. He had commissioned a life-size painting of me, and we fought about this a lot. Well, the war on Colorado City got worse and worse. Prohibition hit. Alcohol? There isn't going to be any alcohol. Well, how do you run a saloon? How do you run a brothel without alcohol? We started fighting about that, and a lot of us decided, we need to form our own city. So we moved about 3 miles to the north and started Ramona. I invested wisely in properties all over, but I invested in a pugilist club. And I hired this cute Irishman just off the boat, Pat O'Brien, and he was my star fighter. He later became mayor of Ramona, and his son later after him. City of Colorado Springs decided, let's cut their water off. We don't want them here. We'll show them. We're much more crafty. We diverted their water system and blew up their tanks. So we got the water. You don't want to try to outcraft somebody like us. We know the tricks. Sorry about that pun. We went on like that for a couple of years, made a lot of money, but at that time it was becoming more and more difficult to get alcohol in. My house I had a frozen pipe. And I called the plumber, and it's going to take a while. So I left with my little niece, little Laura, who also worked for me. And we went up to Denver, and I bought a new Daimler Chrysler. Now, keep in mind that I own stock in Daimler Chrysler. That was one of my investments, as well as MGM, plus my varied properties. My goal was to provide my daughter with the best life that she could have. I wanted her to go to finishing school, so I sent her to Galveston. I wanted to prove to the world that we could be businesswomen and not have to hide our faces in shame. And honestly, I'm not ashamed of my occupation. I'm proud of what I do. We had many names for the women. Ladies of questionable intention, as I've talked about. But I wonder if any of you know the significance of this. This is a brakeman's lantern. And many of the women set up camp, tents, and lean-tos to service the men near where the railroad stopped. The brakeman, should he have to relieve his needs, would hang it up outside where he was. You've heard of the term cat house? Yep. These ladies were often so lonely, very lonely. Society frowned on them. You would not look at a lady. You would look away from her. You would never acknowledge her. Their cats were their friends, their confidants. We all were friendly, but we were also competition. So there was some edge there. That is how we got the name Cat House, because these ladies kept and collected cats. You would understand that. Now, I am always looking for talent, and I invite all of you ladies to contact me for an interview. I want you to know that I want ladies that are well-versed, well-read, perhaps talented on the piano, speak maybe more than one language. Because we have a lot of people coming into the brothels. So please feel free to contact me, and I will set up a private interview.
Okay.
Can I have your name? Oh, come on. I think you would be wonderful. I really do.
Fun, but
It is. Now, I thank you for having me here. Thank you again for allowing me to join your group and not feeling like you're in soiled company.
good job, Lee.